Welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels, a Star Wars Legion podcast bringing you the latest news, general perspective, and competitive discussion.
Hello and welcome back to the Notorious Scoundrels podcast. I'm Kyle. I'm here with Mike and David and Zach. Are you guys excited for Darth Maul?
No.
If by excited for Darth Maul, I'm ready to get force choked off the table, yeah, let's do it. It's going to be a great time.
Woohoo! I love losing
comment.
my 28-point heavies.
No comment. Yeah, I mean, all right. There's two sides of the coin, right? Darth Maul is like one of the most iconic things to hit Star Wars in the longest time, and is arguably the best thing in a Phantom Menace. I mean, a Phantom Menace has grown better for me over time. It's like a fine wine. I think it's actually aged better than the other prequels. But that's because Attack of the Clones is terrible. But that's besides the point.
Yo, you shut your mouth. Attack of the Clones has some great scenes in it.
Listen, I think the prequels are fun because of the Clone Wars cartoon. I think the prequels have gotten so much better because of the cartoon fluffing them up.
The cartoon makes the series slightly better. Although
really
it
does.
also kind of makes you be like, why couldn't they have just done this?
Yeah, but I mean, I'm a firm believer actually that television shows do a better job than movies because they have 30 to 60 minutes a week to build a story rather than cram it all in 2 hours.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, speaking of Darth Maul, and no spoilers here, but the 4-episode arc at the end of season 7 of Clone Wars actually might be one of the best things you can watch in Star Wars. And it is like it ends up being like a 4-part movie, like a 2-hour 4-part movie, right? That's split up in 30 minutes. But the way the story is told over the 30 minutes makes a better cohesive story than Attack of the Clones.
Stop it. I'm sorry. Nobody can criticize a prequel movie ever again after Rise of Skywalker. It's not a thing people are allowed to do anymore. It's just like, you want to see a crappy movie that is so disjointed in plot and like...
Can't they just all be bad?
No, they can't be.
So the second side of the coin, rather than getting everybody riled up about the movies, is if you play droids or had the intentions of playing droids at some point, you must be really excited because Darth Maul looks really good. Now, as someone that does not play droids and has zero intentions of playing droids, I want to flip the table already because he's just going to choke me. He's going to infiltrate on me. He's going to double move, but also charge me because he's got a third attack. I mean, we'll get into the stuff later on. I mean, if you haven't seen the card, I'm probably talking gibberish to you. But Maul looks really good. So that's scary for me.
Well, the plan is to break it down this episode, right?
That is the plan. We will do that in the bulk of this episode. I also wrote a rather lengthy article on Mr. Maul on our website, thefifthtrooper.com. So you can check that out. You can also check out Zach's article on Force Barrier, which posted Monday. This will be yesterday when this comes out. So check those out. But yeah, let's hit some housekeeping real quick.
Housekeeping.
All right, Mike. I understand we got some more GW stuff up on the site.
Yeah, so clearly this is not a GW podcast, but we do have some sweet GW pre-orders up on the site that you can check out if you are into that sort of thing. We have the new Space Wolves Codex along with the Space Wolves releases, and the Death Watch Codex along with the Death Watch releases that came out this week. So if you are looking to get those pre-releases, they're on our site. Check them out. We've also got pre-orders up for all the mats and stuff. If you are looking to, if you missed out on the first run of, like a Naboo mat or a green grass mat, and anything like that. So we've got all that up there. And if you missed kind of our housekeeping segment in the last couple of weeks, we've got contrast paints and some 40k starters, as well as like Age of Sigmar and stuff if people are interested. Anything that's GW that people are interested in that we don't have on our site presently, we can also back order it. It'll take like an extra week, but we can still get it for you. It's not a big deal. Yeah, just kind of expanding the store. And if you're interested in any of those pre-orders or anything like that, look us up.
Just going to drop the URL for those that are unfamiliar. thefifthtrooper.com/shop is what you're looking for.
You betcha. And there's a specific section on there. Like if you go to click on the shop menu icon, there's actually a category for GW pre-orders that will cycle each week. If you're looking for new stuff specifically, it will be in that store category so it's easy to find.
And we also have paints and stuff, right?
We do. We don't have all of the paints presently. You have to order them in bunches of 6. Like you can't just order like 1 or 2 pots of a certain color. You have to order like 6 at a time. So we bought the majority of the contrast range, and we're kind of expanding slowly. You'll see paints probably added to the store as people request them, or as we kind of buy into the new parts of the range.
Null oil is my request.
Yeah, it's on the list. Yeah. It's on the list.
When lockdown first happened, there were stories of stores just completely being out of null oil and Agrax Earthshade because there was like a run because everybody's like, oh man, I got to get this stuff before I get locked down. But it's null oil, one of those most requested paints. And I was going to also say that all this contrast stuff that we're offering now at the shop, it's really good for I would recommend it for every like humanoid model for Legion, especially ones that have a lot of folds in the fabric or maybe textured skin or fur or scales. Bosk is like the seminal example of a model that really takes to contrast yellows and contrast greens. I painted my K2 with contrast paint. I used what's called Black Templar. I used it over a silver undercoat to give it kind of that metal, that sort of look of painted metal. And I'll come back at it with some chipping. Hopefully it'll look real nice. But yeah, the contrast works really well with just about every humanoid Legion figure. You want to avoid flat areas with it. And so I definitely recommend that everybody check that out and see what you can get done with it. You can make some really cool things with it.
Yeah, I paint mostly with Citadel stuff, so I'm pretty excited that that's at least to some degree on our site now. All right, we have some actual Legion news. Not that, we had a ton last week, but we have some Legion tournament news. So let's hit that real quick.
Welcome to In the News.
Yeah, so it's come to my attention that there are primes in Australia this upcoming week. I don't know how official this is. It's possible that they're just like redoing primes that got canceled from like early COVID season. But my understanding is that there are actually prime championships that are handing out worlds invites in Australia. So if I guess you don't have COVID and can buy a plane ticket, maybe that's a trip people are willing to make, but please don't. So that's a thing, which I think is kind of interesting and awesome for the places in the world that can start playing real Legion again, right? Clearly the whole world is not in that place, but it sounds like Australia maybe. Light at the end of the tunnel, maybe? I don't know. I thought it was cool. Figure we could talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, that's exciting. This is sort of word of mouth. If you are yourself an Australian and you know more about this than we do, please let us know. Yeah,
I've talked to one guy about it. He said he was kind of getting prepped for it and stuff. And it's possible the information is wrong, but it felt like a pretty credible source. He was talking very intelligently about it, so I feel pretty confident in the information I was given. So we'll see.
I'd be interested to see what the list look like because I feel like they might not have had a surplus of units over there. Like, I don't know what their phase 2 situation, ARC situation, AAT situation. I think they got Mando's in Inferno. I remember a post getting posted where they had a bunch, at least in one store. I mean, Australia is a big place, so who knows if it's in that area. But I'd be interested to see their list. I have a feeling that you're not going to see lists that are fully loaded in what we would consider, highly meta, I guess, because of physical components that we're not used to using because we're using them on TTS, which I think is going to be interesting to see. Like, if tournaments were happening now where we are, Mike, you have what, 2 phase 2s, right?
Yes. However, this is also maybe a little bit of Legion news that we didn't schedule talking about. It is my understanding that people are starting to find phase 2s restocked in stores.
Oh, okay.
So I've heard some, rumblings about stores getting restocks.
Sure.
I'm not sure if Huzzah has specifically, but people are saying that they're starting to get restocks in, which is also light at a different end of a different tunnel.
Right. Yeah. Because no, but totally. Let's say you went to a tournament tomorrow, Mike, and you only had 2 phase 2s. And you have 2 arcs, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I'm trying to remember what you have in your own inventory, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've got 2 arcs and 2 phase 2s. The nice thing about the 2 arc box set is you can make 3 strikes out of it if you really need to.
Right, but you would not be able to run the list that you were running in Yavin base because you only have 2 arcs. I mean, 2 phase 2s, I mean. I'm just putting in perspective that this could be this could be a thing at this Australian Prime where people would actually want to be running more phase 2s or arcs or an AAT or B2s, whatever you might be running that you might not actually have because the physical product is not in your hand at this moment. Not to like shed like a bad light on it. I'm just saying it might be it's going to be interesting to see these lists potentially.
Yeah, like see how they do in real world, because a lot of this stuff, it's all theoretical, right? Like it's all online, and we don't have any offline. There's just been nothing happening, right? So we have no ability to know whether they're as good as they seem to be.
Yeah, I do think that a lot of times when we talk about like when a unit or a list is good, we tend to talk about it, at least on the cast, in a perspective, and somebody brought this up to me the other day and I was like, I didn't think about it this way. Like whether a list is good in a large scale tournament format like Invader or Gen Con or LVO, like where you have to go undefeated for 8 rounds. It's like super different if you've got to go 3-0 at a Prime as far as like what you can bring and still win with, right? Like you can bring a little bit of jank to a 3-round tournament and go 3-0. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. But like a lot of times when we're talking about lists and like what is at the top and what is good, and for instance, the list I'm running in Yavin, it's basically just Arcstar, right? Like Arcstar is a list that we would expect to be able to compete over a 10-round tournament and go 10-0, right? Like we wouldn't expect an inferior version of that list to be able to do the same thing just because that's a lot of games, right? And so I think when we're talking about the primes, we can kind of be like, oh, you're short of phase 2. Like somebody can slot like a phase 1 in there with a captain or whatever and kind of get away with it.
Yeah, and SKU lists. Sorry, go ahead, David.
No, please. I was going to say it's fundamentally the same list, but I think you have something more salient to say.
Yeah, I was just going to say SKU lists tend to be a little bit more successful in those short tournament formats just because, by definition, a SKU list has hard counters out there. Now, those may not, like they may be great against 3 out of 4 lists, and that 4th list is kind of a hard counter to your list. And in an RPQ where you only have to play 3 or 4 rounds, maybe that doesn't matter. But, if you've got to go 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 rounds without running into one of those lists, it's essentially like pulling a slot machine, right? So, yeah, generally, like we are certainly in our competitive analysis, we are certainly biased towards those long form, 8+ round tournaments. But that definitely doesn't mean you can't be successful with something else in that tournament, or even definitely in a shorter one.
I think it always comes down like a prime, unless you're traveling to a prime. If let's say it's a local prime, I think it also kind of resolves around like knowing what the terrain's going to be. Like if you play at that store, you know what the terrain has. You kind of have an idea whether a vehicle might actually be able to maneuver around your terrain. Whereas an AAT and a Saber Tank and an ATST, if you're playing those right now on Tabletop Simulator, you know what maps those will be fine on and what maps they won't be on. When you're going to a tournament, if you don't know the terrain, let's say you go to LVO and you bring, and this is just all theorizing around what we're saying, right? And it circles back to Mike's point of we focus on like 8 games rather than 3. If you don't know that terrain, maybe a Saber Tank might not work at a tournament where you don't know where the terrain is. But let's say you're going to this Australian Prime and you know what the terrain looks like, and maybe you're expecting some open boards, right? You bring a Saber Tank, whereas you would have brought like Arcstar to LVO, we'll say, right? Because LVO is more flexible. I'm sorry, I should say Arcstar is like more flexible towards LVO to go 8-0 and work on any kind of table. Whereas a Saber Tank, where you know the terrain is going to be open, right? And you know your like player base is not going to bring like a lot of impact, or not even so, right? But I'm just saying, you know that Saber Tank has a chance because you're working with a known quantity as opposed to an unknown, to kind of solidify what Mike was getting at, kind of.
Yep, that's a good point. And if you're going to an RPQ, especially at a store you're not familiar with, if it's local enough to you that it's still drivable, it's not a bad idea to go to like a game night or two in advance just to see what their terrain looks like. Because terrain is one of those things that, especially on the local level, can vary extremely wildly. And it's also extremely important for how the game functions. So,
yeah. I mean, particularly like, I mean, terrain matters for every faction, but like clearly it matters more for like rebels than it does for other factions. I mean, it's just a thing, right? Like if you've got white saves, terrain happens to matter a lot more because you can't fall back on your saves, right? On an open board, you know, clones can fall back on their saves, stormtroopers can fall back on their saves. You know, droids can somewhat, to some degree, because they just have so many wounds you have to chew through. It's a little iffy, but it works well against low firepower lists as opposed that are more like spikes that have like 1 or 2 units in them that do the real damage. Like if you're a droid list that goes up against like a rebel DLT list or something, like you're in a real good spot if you're on an open board, because like, oh, they chipped you with a DLT, they got a droid, whoo, you know, like no big deal. But you know, I think it also depends, like you probably don't have to scout as much if you're just playing a clone gun line, right? Like you're like, okay, I can pretty much bring this anywhere, whatever, right? If you're bringing Pathfinders, you might want to scout a lot.
I think mostly
so hard not to bite this bait, Mike. Oh my god, you're baiting me so hard right now. No, stop. Stop it.
It's. I think the biggest reason you'd want to specifically scout terrain is if you plan on bringing an AAT or Saber.
Yeah, for sure.
Or an Occupier.
Yeah.
Or a Land Speeder. Oh wait, yeah. No one's gonna bring those.
Anything with a huge base, right?
Yeah.
You know.
You want to make sure you're gonna have enough space to move around.
I mean, I'd argue Jedi too. I mean,
Jedi would be number 2 on that list probably.
Yeah, because sure. Or I mean, any Force user, I guess, really like if you go to a store and you don't see any like good line of sight blocking terrain, like it doesn't matter what your Force user can do, they're gonna have a hard day. I mean, I think we're at the point where most stores that are playing Legion have line of sight blockers. Like it's not, I don't think it's Nova 2018 or wherever it was that everyone complains about every year, it seems like. But like I think you'll be fine for the most part, but it's a Jedi could struggle, or Force users could struggle on a board for sure.
Yep. Yeah, I'd say number 1 heavies, number 2 Force users basically are the most terrain dependent lists.
Number 3 Rebel white saves.
Yeah.
Can I balance an airspeeder on top of this? Oh, if only that were actually a question.
All right, how about we move on?
I miss the good old days that never happened.
Oh, one thing, and let's not go down the rabbit hole. But if we do confirm that this is happening, we should also inquire and find out how they're handling silhouettes.
Oh, yes. That would be a very good question.
I'm very interested in that.
I mean, just to be clear, they should be printing them out from that sweet organized play document we've got that is super stellar and awesome.
Now, what's even more complicated is that if we find out that it was a delayed by COVID event, silhouettes technically would not have been around at that point. So either way, I just want to be, I'm curious about how this would work. The silhouette document, Kyle, you make that face. I don't think that came out until after when Adepticon was.
Yeah, but it's not like they're using the unit legality rules for Adepticon Frozen in time.
No, I know. I'm being
Sorry,
facetious.
You can't use Cassian and Iden. You can't.
I'm being that'd be funny. I'm being a little facetious more than anything. But I'm being serious. I want to find out what they're doing about silhouettes in that situation.
Yeah, if you participated in one of these tournaments and you used silhouettes, well, one way or another, let us know how it went and what your store did. Well, I'm curious. We're curious, so let us know.
Yeah, I would love to hear about it.
No pressure. You're the guinea pig.
Yeah, no pressure. Actually, yeah. Isn't this would be like technically the first like OP event even remotely associated with silhouettes because of the timing of this?
I'm like 99% sure.
Yeah, I think so.
Me too.
That if it's a sanctioned event in any capacity, it is the guinea pig.
I mean,
oh my goodness!
Did we use silhouettes for Gen Con technically? I don't remember.
For Gen Con Online?
Yeah.
For online, yeah. Because
I think so.
Automated.
Yeah, but Tabletop
Clearly
Simulator.
A little bit different.
We also, I mean, we also use them for Team League. We used them for Invader.
Yeah.
So,
I'm talking physical tournament.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's important. You know, I don't want to imply that online somehow doesn't matter or is less than offline, but offline is where the game comes from. It's where the game was designed to be done. You know, online is a proxy.
Yeah. And I mean, and then more so, it's the physical tool and the implementation of it that I want to know about.
Right. It's way
more
different
than
the mousing than just mousing, right?
Yeah.
You're actually like mechanically having to put things where in places and, you know, use your, I don't know what the right term is for this. Your ability to do like spatial reasoning, I guess. I don't know if that's what it's
spatial called. Awareness of what your silhouette would look like behind a piece of terrain that you're used to seeing on the internet rather than in real life.
Right.
You know, I mean, I don't know if I would be like Tabletop Simulator. I've gotten down pat. I think I can understand it. Like my spatial awareness on Tabletop Simulator is probably fine with them right now. On a real board, I probably wouldn't be as secure with it. I would probably have to double check it a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, you can always pre-measure, but yeah, of course that taps into your time. But
time isn't really. I just want to know how the store's handling it, whoever's TOing it, how they handle it. And how the players feel about it. If we can get that information, that'd be good.
Yeah, it'd be nice to take the temperature.
And just even like silhouettes aside, Aussies, good on you guys for getting to a spot where you can do tournaments and let us know how it went.
Yeah, like
one way or another.
That exactly, Mike.
Golf
thank
clap.
you. That should be
Golf
celebrated.
clap.
Golf clap.
Yeah. So
kudos.
Send us the tabletop TO if you could too. That'd be
have fun. Let us know how it went. We'll live vicariously through you.
Do they say bravo in Australia? I don't know what words they use.
Cheers. I mean, that's British.
That's British. Yeah,
I don't know.
Maybe they can tell us that too.
The only Australian things I know are dingoes and Vegemite.
You know what? You don't know G'day? All right. I know VB. Never mind.
Let's move on to our main topic. So Darth Maul is fully previewed. He will be out on November 20th with Anakin.
Yes.
I'd have to double check. I don't know.
I think that 20th sounds right.
It's the Friday in that vicinity. The days all blend together.
Yeah.
Yeah, soon, 3 weeks-ish. They will be out. But, of course, you can proxy them right now because they've been essentially fully previewed, both Anakin and Maul. So we're going to talk about Maul today. So I wrote an article on him, which you should check out on our site. And I'm going to open for the purposes of this conversation so I can look at the cards.
I already beat you to that.
All right.
Because I don't know them off the top of my head.
I want to hear
first.
I want to hear your guys' opinion of him because obviously I already wrote like a 4,000 word article on him. So
I mean, first impression is that he is 98% more competitively viable than Anakin Skywalker. He looks
with a troll take.
No,
I don't think that's a troll take. To be clear, I mean, maybe it's meant to be, but I don't think it's that far off the mark.
Okay, all right. Let's put it this way. Hold on. Before we go into this, right? And I'm not even trying to be salty. If I were given an opportunity to take Anakin Skywalker, and we'll get into the command card that gets you to this point and how and what I mean by this, and I was to, instead of have a flaw card, have a card that has me give a wound and just take that wound and go to 5 wounds, I'd rather do that, which is essentially what Maul does without a drawback, right? On top of other things.
I mean,
the drawback is that he lost a wound.
Yeah, we can get into that. There's definitely a drawback there.
There is a drawback to the wound. Again, going from 6 to 5 is no joke because as we've seen with Luke Skywalker, going from operative Luke with 7 wounds to Commander Luke with 6 wounds, it doesn't feel good. I understand that. But it's the toolkit that Maul comes with that makes it okay, right? Like, which we can get into in the cast and we'll discuss it. But all right, hold on, Mike, given the choice, would you rather take a wound and not have that flaw card anywhere? Or would you rather have the flaw card?
I mean, that's sort of an unfair painting me into a box.
Well, I'm not trying to paint you into the box.
That's a trap question.
It is a trap question. All right, you got Admiral Akbar'd you, okay? But I'm just saying, like, the flaw card is a big reason that Anakin has struggles competitively, at least on paper.
I mean,
right?
I think the comparison of Maul to Anakin is an easy one to make because they're coming out at the same time, but I don't think it's the right comparison to be making.
That's fair.
I think we should be comparing Maul to a good unit as opposed to one that's probably not as good.
Holy crap.
Oh boy. Okay.
I mean, I'm trying to be honest here.
You need one of those like sitcom tracks where the audience goes like, "Ooh."
Yeah.
I think I did that for them. I mean, honestly.
If we want to compare Maul to Kenobi or we want to compare Maul to Luke, I mean, I think that that's fair and I think that that's fine. I think that's much more of a conversation than, at least competitively speaking, than comparing like Anakin's flaw card. Like
They're coming out together. It is what I'm gonna do.
I understand. I just there's not much, if anything, that's actively bad in the game or worse in the game than Anakin's flaw card. Like that. Yeah. Like I don't know.
I'm
like,
with you.
Maybe full scouts are worse than Anakin's flaw card. I don't know.
All right, this is not an Anakin episode. We already did that.
It's not. No, that's fine. I would just, anyways.
Oh man!
I don't know what the original question was.
Can that just be like a segment where Mike just dumps on Anakin for like a solid 5 minutes?
I would love that. It'd be very fun to witness, and I would actually listen to that afterwards again.
Yeah,
I don't normally listen.
Scoundrels presents Anakin is horrible.
I don't normally listen back to the cast, but I would listen back on that one. I would argue that one of the best attributes of the Maul release is the fact that he also comes with 35-point droids too. Let's start there. If I read his card, if you haven't seen his card, right, he's 160 point base. He's got 2 force slots, 2 training slots, 6 wounds, suppression threshold of 3. So pretty much a normal force user for the most part. He comes with jump 1, deflect, immune pierce, and Juyo mastery, which is arguably my favorite mastery I think I've seen yet. While you are wounded, you can perform one additional one additional action during your activation. Limit 2 move actions. So, now, keep in mind, you cannot attack twice with this card. There's the only way you can attack twice in this game is if something states that you can take a second attack action, like a Son of Skywalker. Right. So you cannot take 2 attacks just because he has a third action. But it should not be understated that a third action is absolutely massive. He doesn't have Relentless and he doesn't have Charge. but that's okay because he has a third action. And I would argue that it's actually better than not having charge over relentless, because you can move, force push a unit into you, and then you can swing at them, as opposed to other force users who have charge or relentless. If they move and force push you into melee, they are doing that to be defensive rather than take an attack. So his attack range, if I'm not mistaken, is around 15.7 inches or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost range 3. And
yeah.
And so I agree with you. Juyo is the defining thing about Maul's kit for the most part. There's like a couple other things we can talk about, but how Juyo works and like what it allows you to do, like on its face, you look at Juyo and you're like, well, he doesn't have charge, he doesn't have Master of the Force, like, so what is this trying to do? How is it actually going to like make up for the lack of those abilities, right? Because kind of drawing into like comparisons we were making before, like Luke Skywalker, same points, right? Has charge, right? Maul doesn't have charge. He clearly can have charge if he wants it with Juyo, which is interesting. It's also worth noting that Juyo allows you to do some like really weird stuff, like move, pick up a box and move again, or like move, tab a VAP and move again. So you can like, it's interesting because Kyle, I think, when we've talked, and I imagine you wrote this in your article, I haven't actually read it yet.
Come on, man.
Yeah. But you talk a lot about like, he's one of the best units for doing objectives in the game because of Juyo, right? Like he can like sneak out there, do it and come back. Like the whole like new ways, he's kind of got like a pseudo new ways to motivate him going on every turn, or like a reptilian rampage where you can perform 3 actions, you can jump out, mess with an objective and jump back, which is super interesting in and of itself due to how that works. You can use it like a Master of the Force 2 basically if you want it to, but then you lose charge, right? Or you lose that extra action if you use it like Master of the Force. So I think there's a lot of trade-offs. I do think that this is, when I think of this ability, I think of it kind of like in Phantom Menace, since it's such a great movie. Zach, I agree. I never got to say that, but I agree. It's, he's able to multitask and like switch up like what he's devoting his resources to. Like in the fight with Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, like he's constantly dodging, jumping, doing all this stuff, and he's able to kind of like, he's just a badass that is doing whatever he wants. And Juyo to me is like, it's a recover if you want to, it's a recover if he needs it, it's charge if you need it to be, it's it's an extra dodge token if you need it to be, it's an extra aim token if you need it to be, it's whatever you need. It's incredibly versatile, which I think is awesome. And it's an ability in the game that, like, unlike something like Marksman or Precise or like even Suresu and stuff, like the decision tree for Juyo is really complicated sometimes in like what the right decision is.
Yeah, it's interesting because Juyo Mastery it's everything, and it's also really only one thing at a time, like you said, right? And you have to kind of pick on a given turn what that one thing is going to be. So there are times when it's going to be, there are a lot of free action keywords in Legion. Keywords that let you do extra stuff are not new, right? You got charge, you got relentless, you got steady, you got agile, you got tactical, you got Master of the Force. There's a ton of keywords in Legion that essentially allow you to do free stuff. And Juyo is a keyword that allows you to do extra free stuff. But, so there are times when you're going to be less action efficient than someone like Jedi Luke or Obi-Wan, who has both charge and Master of the Force. But there are other times when you're going to be able to do something unique that neither Obi-Wan or Luke can do. You guys mentioned a couple of them already. There are 2 things that are really unique about Juyo. The first is the timing. There's actually three things. The first is the timing, because, all those other things like Charge and Relentless have to be done after a move action. And after in Legion means immediately after. So in order to charge someone, you have to move, and then you have to immediately attack. But with Juyo, there's no such order of operations. You can do it however you want. So one of the sort of token Juyo combos you mentioned already, which is double move, force push a unit leader into you, and then attack that squad after force pushing them into you, which is essentially just, we talk about inches because you can measure in inches on TTS. But it's relevant on a real table too. So that's essentially like a 16-inch or just shy of a 16-inch charge range. And a range ruler is 6 inches. Range 1 is 6 inches. Range 2 is 12 inches. Range 3 is 18 inches. So it's essentially 2/3 of the way between range 2 and range 3. And if you look on your range rulers, they have those little notches and stuff. You'll find that they're at very helpful increments. So it should be pretty easy to, please don't mark your range rulers, but it should be pretty easy to get like a good feel for how far that 16-inch distance is on your range rulers. So that's one of them, right? Move, force push, attack. He has the longest effective melee charge range of any force user. The other thing that makes it really interesting is, to trigger Charge or Relentless, you need to actually perform a move action, right? So it's not really, it's free if you've done a move, but if you're not moving, it's not free. Like, how many times have you just been already in melee with the thing, excuse me, that you want to be with Luke, and you have to just take a good old-fashioned attack action and swing your lightsaber, and you're like, man, that felt really bad to have to use an action to attack.
It's the Tauntaun problem. Tauns would rather move than anything else because they get 2 free things every time they move.
Yep, they get to attack and they get to dodge.
They also get, 3 because they get reposition.
Right. Yeah.
So it's actually 3 free things. But yeah, it's like, wow, I could have done anything but this and done better economically, right?
Yep. So Maul is more efficient in those situations where he's like already stuck in, he's already where he needs to be. And then he can just attack, dodge, aim, attack, dodge, recover, whatever. Another force user is not going to be able to do that. Yep. He can also do things out of order, right? He can attack and then double move. Or he can, the other thing is, since it's super flexible, there's a couple actions for which there is no free action keyword in Legion. One of those things is the standby action, right? There's no move standby for free keyword. But Maul can do that. He can double move and then take a standby action, which he can then use later in the turn to attack the target he's with. And then you guys already mentioned it. The biggest thing, I think, is the objective card action, which there is no other free keyword equivalent for. The only other way to like double move and do an objective would be, I think, with new ways to motivate them or Reptilian Rampage.
Yeah, I think that's it, just about. Yeah. You can sort of
Ins 1 pip.
You can build it with Leia's 2-pip if you are in the right spot, and you can use the speed 1 to base an objective, and then but it's not exactly the same, and it's super timing gated, right? Because you have to do it in the command phase and then activate the unit. But I don't think there's much they can do has an effect like that within its own activation. I think that's pretty much the list.
Yeah, you have complete control of the order of operations in which you want to do it in, whereas the other ones you do but you don't. You have to pre-plan it out in so many different ways, and you also have to take a wound to do it. And I'm not saying that Maul doesn't want to take a wound. To get Juyo, he's going to want to take that wound probably, but he's going to have to get that third action. But it's just the versatility of it is I don't even think you could put it into words, really.
Yeah, it's just like an infinite decision tree.
Yeah, and I know that you mentioned aim tokens. The one thing about that, Mike, is that if you take him with his droids and you use observation tokens, he doesn't even need to take the aim action, which kind of takes, a line of thinking out of it, right?
Before we move on to the droids, I want to mention one more like specific GU combo that's really good, and that's if you take him with Force Choke and Force Push, which personally I would do. You can also take Saber Throw. We'll get into that later, but you can basically double move. That was my daughter, I think, knocking over our recycling. So
nice.
Yeah, you can double move, do the old Force Push a unit into you. If that unit has an objective token, you get to place that token, right? When you do Force Push, you get to place the cohered minis. You get to place the token. So presumably you would place it in base contact with. All right, so you double move. You Force Push the unit leader that has an objective token into you. You drop that objective token in base contact with Maul, because when you Force Push a unit, you move both the objective token and the other minis in that unit where you want them. You choke the unit leader, and then you use Maul's third action to immediately grab the objective token that he just dropped because he's choked. So, and if it's a bomb, then you drop it and then blow it up. Assuming there's nothing else nearby that can grab it.
Look at how happy Zach is.
I was going to say, if you're looking at me, you probably were just witnessing me look at the wall ahead while listening Kyle say all of that. And inside of my head, I am throwing up. So just that is the image that I have, is just me standing at a table as someone does this to me and just throwing up everywhere. Yeah, because it's disgusting.
Visualizing yourself losing? That's like terrible.
Like what you just described is disgusting.
Well, better that you know about it now and not in the middle of a game, which is going to happen to people. Darth Maul's going to do that thing, and you're going to be like, I mean, especially on bombing run. Like if that happens to you in bombing run, you just lose. Basically.
You straight up lose. Yeah. Like, well, or if you, I mean, even on boxes too. Like, let's say you have like let's say you have 3 boxes secured, and you go after one of their boxes, and you do that. Like they're gonna now have to focus to go get the box that you just stole with Darth Maul. Who now you're up 4-1 on boxes rather than 3-2, and S has hit the fan. You know what I mean?
Oh, just wait until they grab your hostage on turn 1 or turn 2 rather, because they can't do it on turn 1. But like, well, yeah, I mean, that's a thing that will happen.
It's so.
You mean pair him with Dooku, put on Seize the Initiative, play a 1-pip, and just do shenanigans?
I mean, you don't even need Seize the Initiative, first of all.
Oh, yeah, because they're droids. Yeah, what am I thinking?
Right, like, and because for a variety of reasons, like, you're going to have an uplink somewhere in there, and they can coordinate to Maul's special forces, right?
Yep.
So it's kind of...
You then want to give a comms relay too, then you can bounce it to Maul.
Yeah.
We'll get into that later. But yeah, I mean, there's a couple of caveats there. It works best against units that have activated already, so that he's, quote unquote, safe in melee. Because if you do that against a unit that hasn't activated, then they just withdraw, and then the rest of the army shoots Maul, and he dies with the objective token in the middle of your opponent's army. So it's not like, what I just described to you is like the dream scenario, right? But it's not. Once people know that that's what can happen, it's pretty rare for them to like end a unit's turn with a unit within 16 inches of Maul that has an objective token, especially like a core unit. Now, there are some things that can't be choked, right? Characters, operatives, and commanders, which includes a promoted trooper unit if you use covert ops. So keep that in mind. If you're playing against Maul, you might want to make sure you're grabbing your bombs or your boxes with commanders and operatives to include ones that you've promoted.
Yeah, I mean, that circles back to something that we mentioned a couple episodes ago, before Maul got revealed. But I mean, Maul being revealed really hurts Mandalorian stock. I was high on Mandalorian stock with Maul coming out. Like it hurts their stock because you don't want Tristan being choked. It's not going to be a fun day. A speed 2 jumping unit with choke and has the ability to do wacky things like Maul changes a lot of the Legion landscape, I think, paired with the droids.
Potentially. I mean, yeah. So we're used to most dark side Force users, actually all dark side Force users have mastered the Force. So we're used to choke being like an Energizer Bunny thing where you just pick a model up every turn once that Force user is in range. It's not quite the same. Darth Maul plays more like Commander Luke. So it's kind of the difference between, Jedi Mind Trick on Commander Luke versus Jedi Mind Trick on Jedi Luke, right? Like Commander Luke uses Jedi Mind Trick once, maybe twice in a game. Commander Luke uses it like 5 times. Right. It's not like Maul is going to be choking 5 times a game.
Yeah, I mean, you're saying that like you don't 3 isn't good enough, right? Like
don't get me wrong.
To be clear, you don't need to use it 5 times. You can use it twice, and it is well above the rate you're paying for it. Right?
I would also argue that you don't choke as often with the other dark side Force users because they don't have the opportunity to infiltrate.
I mean, I disagree with that. I Force choke with Darth Vader 4 or 5 times a game a lot of the time.
Yeah.
It's notable you can do it twice on the implacable turn.
Yeah. I mean, sure. But not a lot of people are playing Vader, and Darkness Descends is completely different than Maul's 2-pip infiltrate card.
It is. So there's 2 things I want to hit there. The first is, my point simply is, it's not as if Dooku or Darth Vader appears in the middle of your army on turn 2 and starts choking dudes out. It's not quite the same thing.
It's not quite the same, but it's not that far away.
Well, yeah.
How about this? Why don't we read the 2-pip and turn this into that discussion?
Okay.
Because we were talking about a precast.
Yeah, let's do the command cards, and then we'll circle back to the probes.
It's a bit of an important discussion because of the timing and how the card is worded, right? I'm trying to find it here. So it's the Phantom Menace. It's 2-pip, Maul and 1 trooper. Maul cannot attack enemy units beyond range 2 of Maul cannot attack him, right? So that is on the top of the card, and then there's a line under that, which is common on all divulge cards. And then there's a divulge deploy unit step. Maul gains infiltrate. During the first round, Maul and friendly DRK-1 Sith probe droids cannot perform objective card actions. Discard this card after it is revealed. So the topic of discussion basically turns into this. Because of the discard this card is after it's revealed, you can divulge it, gain that in the deploy step, discard the card, and you can play another command card. And also notably on that card is you don't have to deploy last, right? That is probably the most notable thing on that card, as opposed to Darkness Descends, which is how this kind of derived. You can pick and choose when you infiltrate Maul, if you want to infiltrate Maul. Maybe there's games you don't infiltrate Maul. We talked about that a little bit before they cast too. Maybe there's games you don't want to infiltrate. I mean, that's certainly the case. Infiltrate, as you learn to use infiltrate, especially with red dice units, probably more than white dice, is you can pick and choose your battles a lot in a sense of where you want to put them, right? But not having to go last means that you can put the speed 2 jumping unit near your opponent's deployment zone behind a line of sight blocker.
Or
and they
in
might
it.
not have, or in it. I mean, hold on, let's not go crazy. But let's say there's a building that is near your opponent's deployment zone. Let's say you're playing, all right, how about this scenario? You're playing hemmed in and they're blue, but you're red. And they deploy 1 unit, not towards the middle, but towards the corner. And then you take Maul and infiltrate is range 3. You put them at range 3 of that unit or of another spot and hemmed in. And he's behind a line of sight blocker. They now have to deploy based around where Maul is. And because it's hemmed in, they might not have a choice of putting a unit into his death range, right? Because it's such a small area to deploy. Obviously, it's better to deploy him if you're blue behind a line of sight blocker because you can put him before anything else gets deployed. But the point being is the timing of it is so much better than what we're used to on a Sith Lord with infiltrate.
What do you mean?
Potentially.
Darkness Descends, because that's the only card that does that, right?
Yeah.
So I mostly agree. I think that this is just it allows you to threaten your opponent's safe stuff pretty much always. I mean, it depends on the terrain, but generally speaking, if there's So your opponent is going to want to put their objectives near line of sight blockers, generally. And this is actually kind of goes to maybe like a more meta way to deal with Maul. But because objectives generally go by line of sight blockers, it makes Maul uniquely good at dealing and zoning people out of enemy objectives, right? People generally put their VAPs behind a wall, or they put their boxes someplace you can't see them, or something like that. And if you're blue player and you have Maul, you can put them anywhere you want at the start of the game. And you already know where the objectives are at that point, right? So, you know, your opponent puts down 2 safe VAPs. You put Maul like range 1.5 away from one of them, behind a wall where nothing can get to him. It's kind of a game changer. Like, what do you do about that, right? There are clearly some things you can do, but one of the things that you tactically can do from the get-go is you can put your objectives in the open, which is actually kind of a soft counter to what this card is doing, to some extent, right? Like, if you're able to position your army somewhere where Maul has to cross, 18 inches of open ground to get to you, all of a sudden he becomes a lot worse. And the infiltrate shenanigans gets a lot worse. So I don't think this card is not, like, you can play around this card, but you got to think like 4 or 5 steps ahead. You've got to be thinking about it like when you're in turn 0, before any unit is on the table. You've got to be going through your head like, they've got Maul, he's got infiltrate, he could go anywhere. I need to make sure that I position my stuff safely regardless of where he is put, or so that I can punish my opponent if they get greedy, right?
Yeah, and I mean, this is the struggle, right? CIS is going to be able to bid relatively hard, I'm pretty sure. And so they're going to be the ones who, come to the table and be like, okay, well, if I know that I have the bid, the first thing that you think of, right, is what are my deployments, and what are my board edges that give me this like sort of ideal piece of terrain for this Maul infiltrate play that I would like to do and that I can have in my kit. Obviously the blue infiltrate has its downsides. A lot of that being that you are showing your opponent where Maul is. And that's why you really have to be sure from the jump that, that where you put Maul down is safe, right? You have to really analyze the angles of shooting and try to like think it through. And like the burden is like somewhat equal. It's not like a gimme, right? It has to be thought through, because when you infiltrate first, you're giving your opponent that information for all of their deployments after that. So your opponent will have not perfect information, but will have the crucial piece of information that they need to counter deploy you. Now, Kyle talks about in his article, and I think this is really important, infiltrate is like, it's not, you don't have to like sort of show your hand right away. Right, it's quite literally the Phantom Menace in that it's an existential threat, right? So if you deploy first, you show your opponent where you are, but just the threat of putting this unit down somewhere is enough to cause your opponent to make, things that could become errors later, right? It forces your opponent to try to account for all the possibilities, and something is going to get through. And so it might even be stronger just to hold your infiltrate to like 6 or 7 and not do it on 1. I think, this is maybe something that I should do when I write my next article, is I think what folks are going to have to start thinking about in turn 0 is now drop count, something that we haven't discussed a lot in Legion, beyond just like, oh, I have more activations or less activations. Literally, we should discuss drop count and having like an actual order of drop count in our lists these days. But that's kind of like a larger discussion. But anyway, back to Maul. Kyle, I just think it was really good of you to put in your article that that you should just hold it. You could hold it over people, and sometimes that's actually stronger than just putting him down right away in a safe spot.
I'd like to counterpoint that. I actually think that's real bad. As someone who's played Darkness Descends many, 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 many times, I would give anything to be closer than range like 2.5 to my opponent. Like if I can like even in a situation where you're not well hidden, like if you can get a dodge token, like he's got a command card that gives him a dodge token, right? I don't know what it's called, but like
it's his 1 pip,
yeah,
or one of his 1 pips.
Like if you just drop him basically on top of their objectives, and I'm not saying like do this in the open, but like
no,
if you can put him in a place where they can move and like maybe get like a heavy cover shot on you, like that's totally cool. I think it's fine, specifically if you play the card with the dodge token, because if your opponent is doing that, then you just respond by like chopping stuff up and basing that unit, and now you're completely safe. Not to mention that shot has a high probability of triggering Juyo.
It depends on a lot of things, because it's possible that you can get shot in that scenario, and that unit that just activated will not be close enough for Maul to engage, and then you just gave away free wounds. Like there's a couple of considerations there. I think Maul, more so than other infiltrators, there are cases for him to be dropped early, primarily because he doesn't have a scout move. So he gets dropped at range 3, full stop. Darkness Descends has a scout move on it. Most infiltrators, like Jin and Pathfinders and Iden, you're taking with recon intel. Darth Maul it's range 3. That's it. That's where he ends. So, he is a little bit more vulnerable to being hedged, but it depends a lot on what units your opponent has. If they have other infiltrators, if they have stuff with scout moves. Like if there's a super obvious spot to put Maul and you can drop him there safely, by all means, drop him there. But just like with other infiltrators, the drop first thing can be a little bit of a trap. And, Maul is not Vader in, at least with respect to this discussion, one important respect, in that he's fast. Like being range 3 away from something is not nearly as bad for Maul as it is for Darth Vader.
That's true. I don't know. I think that the conversation is very different when you literally can pick any place on the table with infiltrate, as opposed to like 30 to 40% of it, which is generally what like a Darkness Descends is. And yeah, both of them basically need 2 turns to close with their target most of the time, if you're infiltrating at range 3 and nobody steps any closer to you.
Well, maybe it depends on what your target is, right? Like if your target is an enemy unit in their deployment zone, that's true. If your target is a box or a key position in the center of the table, you can be a lot closer to it and still drop last, right? So I think of infiltrators, and specifically Maul, because he's a force user that infiltrates, primarily as like an area control piece. And granted, like on Vaporators, the important areas to control might be right next to your opponent's deployment zone, but they're not always going to be. Often they're going to be somewhere near the center of the table. And I'm just as happy to wait to see what my opponent does and drop Maul somewhere near one of those areas than just try and go for some big splashy, like turn 2 engage with Maul.
Yeah. I think that some of this is like down to play style. I think Maul can legitimately end a game on turn 2. Like he can. If you're able to place him correctly and aggressively, and clearly in a safe position, like you can just end the game. And without attacking with other units, without, is that going to happen every time? Absolutely not. But I do think that there are situations that you can build on turn 0 with Maul where your opponent has to like deploy in the back of their deployment zone, otherwise they're going to get butchered. And it's clearly a little bit grayer than that, but I don't know.
Well, it's not just about Maul, right? It's about what insulates Maul that can enable what you're describing, Mike. And what I mean by that is with droids and a lot of cheap activations, you can arguably get him to like 11 activations, probably, like even with Dooku. I'm just assuming off the top of my head that you could probably get to maybe like 10.
Thin. It's really thin.
Yeah. But let's say not with Dooku, and I'm sure he's very good with Dooku. But let's say in the near future, right, and like the generic droid comes out. We don't know what he does, but we know that he's going to be a lot cheaper than Dooku and Grievous. And you get yourself in a situation where your droid list is now 11 or 12 activations because you have a generic, droid commander. Maul is going to have this position where he can infiltrate early. He can probably make sure that he has an order for the most part, or if you're going to the bag, it's not that bad, right? If you time everything correctly with uplinks and how you coordinate, and you're going to be able to get yourself in a position where you can get in your opponent's face with no repercussion because you're going after everything that's activated in their list. Let's say if that's to, move towards an objective, like you were saying, or move towards them as an army. Obviously, standby sharing, changes that whole math, right? But even then, there's so many different things you can do because the droids are able to bolster him even more so than other armies can. Like the one thing I write about with Kenobi and about Luke, right, is that they effectively want an army behind them that can also guide them to where they need to be. So Maul can now get to where he wants to be with the infiltration, and he also has an army behind him with a lot of bodies and decently good firepower. Like B1s throw a lot of white dice, but like B1s with an E5C, which you can probably get easily in a Maul list, like they're still good.
They are, but you also want them to be close enough to Maul when he engages.
Yeah, I could see that being the issue. Like you don't want him to be too far.
You don't want him to be too far from your main army, and you don't want to just like dive in there with just Maul, and the rest of your army is like range 4 or 5 away from him. I mean, that's where the droids come in, though, right? Like, well, I guess that's why I'm saying like just dropping him in the middle of your, like right next to your opponent's deployment zone. It's not always going to be a good idea, even if that's right next to an objective, if he's completely unsupported where you're dropping him.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, I do think it's a little bit more complicated than that. I do believe you can operate him independently like that.
You can. There are times when you're going to be able to do that. But I think it's also super easy to get like bloodlusty and do that more often than you can, because if you mess that up, you can also lose the game on the first turn.
No doubt. Absolutely. I think that's an important distinction in his kit, that like he has the ability to operate on his own super aggressively and actually be effective. Like there is no other Force user in the game that does that. Like hard stop.
Like certainly no other infiltrator.
I mean, I have to admit, this is probably the first divulge card that I think is like good. Like on the face of it. Like I'm not saying that Padme's divulge is not good. It gives her secret mission.
I was about to say.
Well, no, it gives her secret mission, but it's the issue that I have with Padme's is that you don't discard it and play another card. You can discard Maul's and then play a different card, like standing orders, which also gives all the droids orders, and if you do it correctly, also gives Maul an order, and you played standing orders.
Yeah, I mean, it seems pretty good to be able to kind of infiltrate it 4 pips safely. Like that's with like perfect order control.
Right.
Seems really good.
You play this and then play standing orders.
Well, pseudo perfect.
To be fair, a lot of infiltrate units can do that. That's kind of anyway.
Uplink, right?
Well, and like there are lots of units that infiltrate just printed on their card. We kind of talked about this with Anakin. But this is much more in the vein of Darkness Descends, where like you're playing a card to get a keyword that other units just have. right? And unlike, Vader's command hand aside, he has 6 cards, so you're basically going from 6 to 5 when you infiltrate. Maul is going from 3 to 2. And his other 2 cards are both 1-pips. So he doesn't have the most flexible command hand, let's put it that way. Like, being able to infiltrate with a Force user is amazing, but it's not without cost either. It's costing you 33% of his command cards to do it.
It's also worth noting that his other command cards are super good, but they don't do anything like obnoxiously crazy. Like the one where you can't spend tokens is really good, but it's not like Master of Evil or
very situational.
Yeah, they're 1-pips. They're 1-pips with upside, basically.
Yeah,
right.
And
that's pretty much all they are. So you're not getting any like this is his crazy effect card for the most part.
Yep. Right. And actually, let's talk about those other 2 cards. So the first one, let's save that last for a second, because that's probably the most important one of the 2. Duel of the Fates is the one that's basically your opponent cannot spend green tokens while they're in base-to-base with Maul, which is situationally very strong. He also gets dodge and disengage, which is, in my opinion, the much more reliable and consistent portion of this card. And it's a 1-pip, which is great.
Yeah, disengage is super good keyword. Like, Luke's the only one that's got it, right?
Yep.
And it's fantastic.
It's on Trained in Your Jedi, or it's also
Grievous
gets it. Grievous also has a version of it, but it's really good.
Yeah. Now the token, the no spending token thing is great against other Jedi. I would sort of caution against viewing this as like an auto win Jedi matchup card, because it's super rare for one Jedi to one-shot another Jedi outside the context of Son of Skywalker. And even then, it's pretty rare, just because Pierce immunity really gives you a lot of resistance to lightsabers.
What, you don't just dunk Luke Skywalker with Makashi Mastery?
Even then, like, Dooku only has 5 dice. It's statistically impossible for him to kill any Force user.
That's true.
With Pierce immune.
That is true.
And he's
except
only got,
for Maul. Because Maul might have 5 wins.
Except for Maul.
Yeah.
Yep. Which is a whole nother thing. Yeah. I guess technically he could do it to Palpatine too, but Palpatine would have to get really unlucky on his saves for that to happen.
Definitely.
But anyway, the point is, like, they'll just play this and expect to win a Jedi duel, because you're going to play it. You're going to take a swing at Obi-Wan or whoever. They're not going to get to spend their dodge token, but they're still going to make probably 2 or 3 saves on your 5 or 6 hits. And they're going to be half dead, and then they're going to swing back at you, do 1 to 2 wins to Maul, and then force push you into the open, and the rest of their gun line is going to gun you down. So,
right, it's a finishing move, right?
Yeah, it's a finishing move. For the Force user duels are generally won by patience, and more specifically by whichever Force user ends up in the open after they've activated.
You mean whichever Force user doesn't end up?
Sorry, yes, right. They're usually lost by the Force user that ends up in the open after they've activated. Basically, this is the short version. It's relatively rare for a Saber user duel to come down to them like hacking each other apart. Outside of Dooku doing the last couple of wins to someone, which is a little bit more reliable, and outside Son of Skywalker. Those are like the 2 instances, but Maul's not going to do it, probably.
Well, I think it's also worth noting that if there was a Force user that's going to one-shot another Force user without any crazy effects, it's Maul, right? Like, he's got 9 dice with tenacity.
Yeah. The ceiling is there.
The ceiling is there. Now half those dice are white dice without surge.
No doubt. If he does have outs to that, though, unlike some other Force users, right? Like, if you're in a duel with, like, Vader and Luke, and they're both at full health, and, like, Vader's like, I really got to kill Luke this turn, like, it's kind of unlikely if you can only roll 6 hits. But if you've got 9 dice, like, there's an out there.
Yeah. Also, you say without surge, but that's where Outlast comes in, right?
Yeah, so he can get Jedi Hunter. Just to round out Duel of the Fates, I kind of view this as like ambush with benefits. Basically, the dodge token is the primary benefit on this card. The disengage is the secondary one. The you can't spend tokens thing is situationally amazing, but oftentimes you're going to need to play this when you're in melee with like a core unit or something, and they're not going to have any tokens that you care about anyway. So.
It's really good against clones.
It is
just kind of generically like they always have tokens floating around.
Yep.
They're not going to be able to like you can't spend a standby. It's a green token, right?
Yep.
Like that's one of the more common ways to deal with force users in melee is, you jumped into melee with my ARC troopers. Well, I have a standby token. Eat 10 white dice, fool. Right? Like
with a bunch of shared aims, which
right.
you also can't spend.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So this shuts down a lot of that, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, and it's worth noting there too, because Maul often essentially starts, quote unquote, starts on 5 wounds. He's kind of uniquely vulnerable to being like punched to death by random dudes.
Yeah, someone proxied Maul the other day, and they mentioned to me that it was killed by Leia punching Maul.
Yeah, like it happens. 5 health is not a lot, and those red dice are really fickle. You know, you charge a unit of stormtroopers or something like that, especially since he only has 1 card that gives him a dodge token. You got to be a little careful that they don't just like beat you down, because that can definitely happen to Maul. You have to be kind of careful about when and where you engage, and it's not just about avoiding ranged attacks. I mean, if they have like an actual dedicated melee unit like Wookiees or IRG, you really don't want to have Maul involved with them at all. But yeah, be aware of those punchy units, including clones with shared aim tokens, which can hurt a lot, especially arcs.
Oh yeah.
Any other thoughts on Duel of the Fates other than that the art is amazing?
You know my thoughts on this card, Kyle.
Hello there.
Hello there. Yeah, it's pretty much a direct counter. Well, if they're already in base to base with each other, it's a direct counter with hello there. If they're not, then it's really not, because Obi-Wan just spends a standby before Maul actually physically bases him. But
if he's at range 1 of Kenobi, it still is, right?
Yeah, right, because he bases him and then right. But it's a little more situational than I think your nightmare scenario there, Zach.
Well, it's worth noting that I don't think this is a dive card for the most part. Mm-hmm. This is something you're playing after you've dove and you're already in there, right?
Yeah.
Just because of the effect. I mean, most of the time. That's not to say you couldn't use it as a dive card. The dodge token is still pretty good, right?
It is.
But
I'm always wary of diving with a 1-pip with a force user, just because like once you've dived and murdered something, you're vulnerable.
But you have that extra third action to move away.
Well, yeah, you can do a peekaboo, which is great.
You can like dip in, chop them apart, and then run behind line of sight blocking terrain or something. I don't know.
Well, yeah, it's also worth noting that you can get in there, force choke 1 heavy, slaughter a second, and then base a unit that's activated, right? And like effectively skewer 2 units that haven't gone, and then safely tuck yourself. Like clearly that's gonna depend on like what the board state looks like, but like if you're attacking like a balled up bunch of core, like that's not that unreasonable.
That's your ideal setup is to end all of your turns once you're stuck in base to base with an activated unit.
Yeah. I mean, the more and more we discuss it, the more and more I'm sitting here and thinking that Maul is going to be like a thing where you ask yourself, what is the right decision with his 3 actions? And I know we've discussed it like 10 times already, but the more and more we talk about it is that you're going to come to a crossroads where there might be like 3 right decisions and one just might be better. You just might not be able to tell at that moment. But a lot of the times you're going to be facing a situation where you have to choose out of like a bunch of different options. And if it works out great, and if it doesn't, I mean, what are you going to do about it? Is the way I'm seeing it. Like the good thing is, right, is that he has those options. I mean, don't take it as a bad thing at what I'm saying. Like, I think it's great that he has those options. It's just navigating it's going to be tough, I think.
I'm looking forward to CIS players chewing up all my clock time with 12 activations and trying to figure out the best line for Maul.
To be fair, I don't think the line is that hard to find once you've played with him a few times. Like, the line that is right most of the time is the line where Maul doesn't take damage after you activate him 100% of the time, right?
Yes.
Yes. They're Jedi are somewhat like arc dodgers to some, like, to use an X-wing kind of metaphor, right? Like, they do the shooting, but they really don't want to get shot at. And I think Maul is kind of the like pinnacle of that to some degree. Juyo makes him very flexible at not getting shot. Because specifically if he's got his force powers up. If he has force powers up and he has Juyo active, and you don't need to recover to bring them back up, like, you can do a lot of janky stuff and be able to, like, get in there, melee some stuff, and ensure with 100% certainty that you're going to be safe. I mean, we talked about this a little before the cast. If your opponent has Maul and you do not have a Force user, it is a super different game than if you had one. And that is true for every Force user, but I think it's a little bit more true here, just because, if you've got a Force user, you can always, Kyle was saying, like, Force push him out of melee if he gets in there. You can dive in super early with Maul if they don't have a Force user and be completely safe. You could do it on the third activation of a turn and skewer 2 units, be safe, and they could literally not be able to do another thing to Maul the entire turn. And that's not, like, an unreasonable situation to be in.
I think it's genuinely possible that we're heading towards a Force user heavy meta, strictly because you need to have a way to deal with Maul. Like, if you are going to be playing, I play against a lot of droids, right? In my meta, like, my local meta is a lot of droids. They're going to be playing a lot of Maul. I mean, I play Obi-Wan anyways, mind you, right? But let's say I wasn't playing Obi-Wan and I was playing like a gunline list or something like that. I feel like I would have to shift, personally. I mean, that's just how I feel. I mean, it's super table dependent, of course, but Maul joining the fray, Force barrier becoming a thing on, defensive units like Dooku and Obi-Wan. Like, I just think that there's potential that we're going to see a lot more Force users than we're used to. Especially like, I think it's a great thing. I think it's awesome. I mean, again, I only play Obi-Wan or Luke primarily. Like, that's what I want to play. So, like, I feel right at home, but I do think it might be a bit of a shift. Because one thing we haven't really pointed out is that if you are playing him with Dooku, right, and you put Dooku with barrier, which I'm sure you like, Kyle, on Dooku, and let's say he's close to Maul, and Maul's about to take a shot or something because he went and grabbed an objective and couldn't get behind a wall. Well, guess what? Dooku's going to stop that from happening with barrier. Again, they might not be close because of how the situation is, but you're going to have that option there, right? You might have that option there, which is good to have.
What about Supreme Commander? So you can Guardian Maul with
man, that just made me nauseous too.
Yeah, I actually really like him with Grievous.
Yeah, Maul Grievous. That's a combo.
Because you can get to 10 activations with beef left over, basically. Yeah. Unlike the Dooku.
And Grievous combo. Is also a vertical professional, right, with scale.
Yep.
Vertical professional. Is that what we're calling them now?
I don't know. An expert climber.
That's the list.
Professional.
No, that is the list.
That's the most, like, thesaurus term for it. He's
a parkour expert.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, there you go. Parkour experts.
Parkour.
Yeah.
Now, here's my question, right? So to kind of segue into At Last. Okay, let's read the card. It's while building a command hand, treat this card as though it has 3 pips. Maul gains 1 aim token and Jedi Hunter. When he activates, he may suffer 1 wound. Here's the ultimate question. Terrible. Do you play the 2-pip Infiltrate and then play At Last to get yourself to Juyo, or is that a trap?
Trap.
Most of the time, it's a trap. It's not always a trap.
This is your dive card. In my mind.
Well,
I mean, most of the time, I think.
So let's explain what you mean by dive.
Sure.
Are you implying that you necessarily have to go first?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Because I think that's a misconception.
Let me clarify. When I say dive, and I say this a lot, so
Yeah.
maybe this is a good time to explain. What I mean is it is the turn, like, often even if you're going to do it as like the last activation of a turn, you know that your objective this turn is to put this force user into base to base with something. And so when I say dive, I mean this is the turn. This is our go ahead turn. Your
engagement turn.
Right. You're throwing the Hail Mary.
Yep.
You're whatever. And so that's what this card says to me. This enables Maul to do the crazy stuff. And frankly, he doesn't generally need to do the crazy stuff until he gets into the thick of it. So to me, this is a preparatory card for that. Now, that's not to say that you couldn't like play it on turn 2 to grab a box or whatever. I think that that's still reasonable. But I think if you're not doing objective shenanigans, you're probably not playing this before you dive. Generally, I also think it's reasonable to trigger Juyo off just getting shot. Clearly a little bit less good, but it also like gives Maul an extra hit point. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, my rule of thumb is basically like play it as soon as you need Juyo, as soon as you are 100% sure that you need Juyo, and not earlier than that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, if he's not engaged and he's not interacting with objectives, the fact that Juyo doesn't give you 3 move actions, what's like you can move, dodge, I guess, but like that's not that interesting,
yeah.
Right? Like, so I think most of the time before you need Juyo, you're just moving anyways, and if you're finishing your turn somewhere you need a dodge token, you did it wrong, and
then maybe you'll still get shot anyway, and they'll trigger Juyo for you.
right. That's the thing. So, yeah.
Are the stance cards any good? Because you have that extra Juyo, or is it just a trap?
Potentially. I think offensive push is probably more reliable.
Yeah.
But, so in my opinion, well, let's table upgrades. Let's round out. Yeah, let's round out the command card discussion real quick, and then we'll go to upgrades. Yeah, I mean, at last it's funny that it counts as a 3-pip because like I feel like I want it to be a 3-pip because I know that
this is like aggressive Mike, like.
Yeah,
like,
I know we have different play styles.
I'm like,
yeah.
A third 1-pip and one of them can be cunning. Sign me up. Yeah. I don't know.
I get that it's great for like constant up tempo potentially, but it's also very common and usually wise. We talk a lot about last first, right? But go like on your turn where you're actually engaging with Maul or any other force user, you want to be going at the tail end of a turn, and then the next turn you want to go first generally. Now, it's not always the case because sometimes, if after you've engaged, you want to see what your opponent's going to do. Assuming you're in melee with a unit, you're relatively safe until that unit does something like withdrawal. So last is pretty, that's pretty viable too with force users. But generally, you don't want to be like jumping into your opponent's army on the first activation of a turn.
I agree.
Because then they're just going to withdraw and shoot the crap out of you.
I think because of the faction it is in, though, I disagree with you fundamentally. If this was like Operative Luke and he had 3 1-pips, I would be way less high on it. But this is not 3 1-pips for Maul. This is 3 1-pips for your entire army because everybody has ambush because you're droids, right?
Right.
Uplink orders are out and you're fine.
Yeah. So the ideal time to play this is there's 2 things basically, right? You want to do it on the turn that Maul is engaging, which means Maul himself probably wants to go last. But since it's a 1-pip, if you can set up a situation where literally any other unit in your army wants to go first, then you can kind of have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah, that's why I love this card. I just think it's just like, I mean, it's nice to be able to have 3/1 pips to go first with Maul, but I think in reality, you really still only have 2 like 1 pip cards for Maul, and this one is this is your dive card, and you're going last, and you're shooting somebody with a B1, or Grievous is going first, or something, right? Like, to be able to like get in there with Grievous and then follow up with Maul is like
get in there with Grievous. Grievous hacks up something. That something withdraws. Maul moves in there, force pushes the unit back into Grievous, and then bases it.
Yeah, I mean, like that's like a reasonable thing. That's not that far fetched, right?
I know.
And it's like it is a situation where you end the turn completely safe because they withdrew to get out of melee with Grievous. I don't know. Like Grievous is 100% safe in that situation, and Maul will be too. And
except for melee units, but or force push
units, of course. I actually think we talked about kind of the safety factor here of jumping into melee with Maul and the tricks with it. I think we've seen a lot of standby sharing lately. What we haven't seen a ton of is just generically taking standbys. I think you're going to see, specifically in competitive environments, I think, see a lot more generic standby tokens taken with Maul on the table.
I agree.
Just because that's like one of the only ways to really effectively deal with him.
Well, and chances are, I put together some sample lists for this article I wrote, but if your options right now are Grievous or Dooku to run with Maul, and those, Separatists have some cheap activations, but generally speaking, you're going to be cutting BX droids over B1s when you're trying to cut points. And most of those lists end up with like 1 sniper. So the standby stripping ability, even the conventional standby stripping ability of a list with Maul in it right now is not very high.
Yeah, I think it's completely possible that the lists that will be running Maul and whatever other thing with lightsabers actually wants the range 4 guns on the droids specifically for that reason, so that they can breach the standby bubble.
It gets really tight with points though. Even 2 points
sure
there
is. I'm sure
it does. Like to run Maul Dooku, if you want heavies on your B1s, you're like you're leaving a training slot open on Maul. Doing stuff like that.
I don't think that's unreasonable.
No, I agree.
Yeah, I think I built a list for my article, and it was Dooku, Maul, and then I think it was, oh man, I'm trying to think. I think like 5 B1s, and then the probe droids and 2 snipers, but like only like 2 heavy weapons. It was like 2 heavy weapons, 2 uplinks, and like 2 nakeds, or like a naked or something like that. Like I like points get weird in that kind of situation.
It starts getting thin. Yeah. All right, should we just move on to upgrades?
Let's do it to it.
All right, David, you wanna do your offensive defensive stance?
Oh yeah, I mean, I was just wondering, like, you could totally take offensive defensive stance on this cat because it's, he's got that extra action, right? So if you're already engaged, you can hit the aim token, you hit the aim action, get 2 aims, and just chop in there. And you need it to fix your stuff because you have a bunch of white dice that are kind of, so they need that help. But I was actually reflecting on it while we were having that conversation a minute ago, and I was thinking to myself, man, there's all those limitations about spending tokens. And I mean, I don't know, maybe defensive stance is the better call there because you have observation tokens from your special forces unit, and you just D-stance to get 2 dodges for 2 uses of deflect. And then you have observation tokens to fix your dice if you need it. So, D-stance is probably the answer there.
Yeah, I mean, so he's got 2 training slots. I think the first one is tenacity 100% of the time.
Oh, yeah. He's going to be wounded.
Right.
Like 100% of the time.
Yeah.
It's basically an always on for him.
Yep.
Well,
right.
and I think just circling back to at last real quick, like you can guarantee tenacity is on. It's not like it's not like Wookiees or something where like, they can choose to not activate it to make you have an extra red die, right? Like this is something you have complete control over. So it's a no-brainer.
Yep.
Yeah.
But the second...
did we mention that his At Last gives Jedi Hunter?
Oh, it does, yeah. It also gives him an aim token.
Yeah, so if you're like flying up on a Jedi, that would be the turn to be in defensive stance. Well, no, sorry, defensive stance. You can spend your aim token, but it's the turn where his aims are the most valuable, right? Because he's got that surge crit versus Jedi.
Potentially, yeah. It's super situational.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of edge casey. Anyway, you were saying.
Oh, well, yeah, no, it's a good point. We did completely forget about the other two things that At Last does.
Yeah, we did.
because the wound thing is the single most important one.
Right, because it turns tenacity on.
Right. Well, and Juyo.
And Juyo, duh. Okay.
But yeah, it does give you an aim token. It does give you Jedi Hunter. Similar to Duel of the Fates, I think, there's the reason that you play that card is the wound thing, and then those other two effects are kind of just bonus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, anyway, so tenacity is stapled out to the first slot, but the second slot I think is really interesting. And I do think offensive defensive stance is in contention there simply because, the other candidate that people mention a lot is offensive push, which I think is also potentially very good because Maul has the option to recover a lot. And if you do that and you run him with push and choke, you're recovering 3 cards, which is obviously a lot.
Huge recover value there.
Yep.
Stack those exhaustibles, and you're going to have that extra action to recover anyway.
Yep. But you can't get dodge tokens from offensive push.
Also true.
And dodge tokens for any Force user and certainly for Maul are vastly more important than aim tokens. So,
he's got that. He has the same body as Luke, right? And I always feel like if Luke doesn't have a dodge token on him, you're kind of screwed if you're going to take any damage in return.
Yep.
You're as bad as a stormtrooper, but you're like 200 points or whatever, So you want dodges on this guy. You need the bigger save. You need the damage return. It's just part of the damage that he's able to do.
Yeah, I think I'd still lean offensive push just because, to actually get value out of defensive stance, you have to take the dodge action. But once Maul's in, he's got the extra ability to do that. So I could definitely see it.
Yeah, and especially if he's got 5 wounds to protect, it wouldn't hurt to have the extra defenses.
Yep, for sure.
I think it really depends on like what force powers you're taking, and I think there is a right choice, but I do think that there's like, if you take like saber throw in one of his force slots, I think offensive defensive stance starts to make a lot more sense. Because you're going to be taking the recover action less, right?
Yes.
And so if you're devaluing that recover action in the other 2 slots, I think that makes sense. But I do think that it's like it's almost always force push, force choke, and I don't think it's super close. I don't know.
Well, there's things that force choke lets you do that no other card lets you do.
Right, that's the thing, and the same with force push, frankly, right? Like, they're 2 insanely unique effects, and because Juyo is so flexible, if you want them, you can have them, right? Like, it's not like Luke where there's like significant repercussions for recovering in the middle of his turn. Not that there aren't significant repercussions for Maul recovering, but like he clearly has a little bit more give there if he needs it. So, I don't know. I mean, it's just, I think once you're stuck in, you're probably recovering every turn, unless you can't keep Maul safe, in which case you didn't recover.
You're definitely recovering a lot, but
the unique thing about throw is the range 2, and he's also going to have the extra action. So if you are, if you're on your way in going last, that saber throw is not a small attack against whatever he's trying to go into. It's 4 red with Pierce 2, even if it doesn't surge, is certainly not nothing.
Yeah, I mean, if you catch a unit in the open with that, which because he has jump is somewhat reasonable, That's a maximum firepower or tauntaun shot, basically, with Pierce 2 stapled to it. Clearly, it doesn't surge, but, they're still red dice.
You're going to kill 3 to 4 models with that.
Yeah, pretty, consistently.
It's gonna hurt.
And it's worth noting that he basically has Relentless if that's the build you're going for. I don't know. Like it's fine.
A style. It's a style.
It
right?
is a style, and I think that's the style that you're probably taking offensive defensive stance in. You're playing a little bit more cagey. You have turns where like he's not in melee and sitting behind a wall, so he takes a dodge token or whatever and gets 2. I think that's fine. I think it's probably on average less good, but I do think it is a way you can play Maul.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never been a big fan of saber throw, so maybe my opinion is not really like great here. It doesn't fit how I play the game with the Jedi. Like I just don't want like the unique thing about Maul and saber throw as opposed to other Jedi, perhaps, or Force users. I say Jedi just because it's so natural in my brain, but the unique thing is that he can move, Force throw and then move again, but in a different direction. Like he can maybe like Force throw something to his right and then move over to his left and like engage a unit or something like crazy. I mean, I'm not saying that's what he's going to want to do, but like when you're doing like a peekaboo with like Anakin or Vader, it feels a little bit different because you don't have that third action flexibility, right? You're doing the peekaboo and you're probably moving back. Whereas Maul can like do that action and then kind of decide if he wants to move back, if he wants to move forward. Depending on how many activations are in the list, if he's going last, he can like maybe move, Force throw, and then move forward again. I think it's speed.
Could you elaborate on what you think the difference is here? Just because
it's identical, basically.
It's
Relentless.
Well, it
in
is
that context.
It is, but it's a different line of thinking. Like I know it seems like it is, like, but the thing is Vader moves slow, right? Anakin is probably not going to have an army of activations behind him, like that is going to enable him to like continue moving forward. Whereas Maul, if you get him into the right situation, especially if he's paired with Dooku, and you have ways to get, let's say you're playing like a cunning 1-pip and give Maul an order or something like that. Like there's ways for Maul to do a lot of different things with the throw than other Force users in my mind. At least that's just how I feel on the face of it. I will never take say Force throw in my opinion. That's just not how I play the game. I think Force throw, like saber throw. I always keep on saying Force throw, but like I don't know why it doesn't have like sharpshooter 1 or something. I don't know, something about like throwing half your dice into cover and like if you don't surge, it just feels bad half the time. It feels good. Yeah, like it just doesn't feel good. I also don't want to be. I don't want my like Force user, and maybe this is because I play Obi-Wan and Luke, and I never play with Relentless, right? If I'm moving in saber throwing, I'm stuck in that position. Like I don't like that. I'd rather be double moving into a position and saving my 3 black die.
But that's the thing. You still get to double move. You're right. You get to double move and then choose whether to throw or not. And honestly, you're going to be in situations where that double move doesn't get you there. And you're going to be like, well, instead of, and choke won't even get you there. So that extra range band on throw does have a merit. But it all depends on your angle of attack. It's a lot of, I'll just say it. Choke has the two big things Choke has going for it, right? You can choke unit leaders and heavies, which is something that's really good, obviously. It's also like you just have to be in range of something. You don't have to care about the intervening cover or line of sight blocker. It's easy.
It's
and
sure.
It's not board dependent. And so it's kind of like how do you say it? It's got that path of least resistance attraction kind of built into it,
Yeah, I do think the saber throw conversation, specifically to your point, Zach, about he's stuck there. There's nothing you can do. I think that conversation is a little bit different because, if you're playing Maul and Dooku together, like you can be 100% sure he's not stuck there. You just play a cunning 1-pip and get him out, right?
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like you have like so many different ways that the saber throw cannot like handcuff you in other ways and other lists is how I feel.
Yeah, I mean, to what you said, David, like force choke is just, it's the beat. If you haven't played with force choke and like choked out like 4 heavies in one game, as soon as you do it, you will be on the force choke train. I promise. It is addicting. It is disgusting. It is everything I love about Legion.
Just the biggest weapon against it is 18 inches, right? Like that's what you have to do. You have to somehow be 18 inches away from somebody.
Right. And I mean, not to like go completely full circle here, but this is why I think the infiltrate card is like fantastic, right?
Yeah.
Like
because you're gonna be in range for force choke, and there's probably your opponent can't do anything about it.
I mean, like, yeah, if you can
lose by walking away from their objective.
Yeah, if you can aggressively play small safely, like it is such a game changer where you're like, if you want to come anywhere close to the things that you need to win the game, you immediately lose 2 heavy weapons. Like that's just what's going to happen. There's nothing you can do about it. Hope you brought medics.
Yeah.
Well,
speaking of medics,
this is why I kind of want to switch back to tauntauns, because tauntauns are less vulnerable on the average to force choke. And if you only take a single commander, you can do the nominate thing with Cassian, where all your important stuff then is like somewhat resistant / immune to force choke. It's better, sort of.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly force choke is less good against taunts, but let me tell you, when you clip the last wound on a taunt unit with force choke, it feels even sweeter. Yeah. Let me tell you.
You will channel the dark side you crave.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about force push a lot, and I mean, I still think that force push is like arguably like the best card in the game, probably for what it does. But like force choke might be like the best 5 points you can spend in Legion.
Yeah.
Well, hang on. Let's dispel. So this applies to both force choke and force push. We got to dispel something about these cards. They're not 5 points and 10 points. They're 170 points or 165 points at minimum, right?
Oh gosh. I mean, yeah, but you're paying for so much more.
Well, sure.
Like in the case of Vader, like that's what I feel like I'm paying for most of the time. Is like I'm just paying for something to staple force push or force choke to. Like, don't get me wrong, he kills things with a lightsaber, but he could have a 3 white die attack and still be like, a force choke monster.
No, I think that's totally what it is. Because like, when I was playing the other night and I was behind that rock, I was like, man, I kind of wish I could just jump, force push something around the corner and then move back and just, you know what I mean? Like I think my issue, like that's like my issue going into Legion. Like if I don't have force push in my list, I feel naked. I know that sounds crazy, but like, I don't feel right. I want that in my list somewhere. Like maybe it's a crutch. Call it whatever you want. You want to call it a crutch?
Not a
go
crutch.
for it. But like,
it's really good.
I like having that like in my list somewhere, no matter where it is. I don't care what unit it's on. If it's in there, I feel comfortable. When I don't have it, I feel very uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's like you're not just getting a lightsaber when you buy Maul or Luke or Vader or whoever. Those because you could just get an IRG unit or a Wookiee unit, right? And they can do basically the same melee damage, sometimes more. The unique thing you're getting is access to those force powers. And sure, it's easy to be like, oh yeah, you force choke 1 heavy, force choke pays for itself. 5 points, choke out a 25 point heavy, boom, it's just quintupled its value. It's like, well, you paid 160 plus points for that force user. If that force user does nothing all game except choke 1 heavy, That was not a good investment. Right?
You ever have the conversation with a significant other about coupons? It's kind of similar, right? It's like, oh, I'm saving $10. Like, well, you still paid $90 for the thing. Well, I was going to buy that anyway. It's that same
right?
kind of thing, right? Like,
I got free shipping on my GW order.
Exactly.
Yeah, I saved so much on shipping.
I saved so much money. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man,
it's similar, right? But no, I totally get it though. But I mean, like, it's also your opponent let you stand at range 1. Like, there's a little bit of that.
I mean, totally. But like, there comes a point in every game where you can like no longer play around force push and force choke.
Also true.
Like, I mean, it's very common over the course of like the first 4 turns. Like, you can be like, all right, I can play around your force user, but eventually, assuming that you've played the force user correctly and something hasn't gone horribly wrong, you're supposed to have engineered a situation where they have to deal with the dude with the lightsaber, right? Mm-hmm. If you haven't done that, you should figure out how to, and I'm sure we can have a conversation on a larger scale at some point, and I'm sure we have, but it's been a while.
Yeah, we need to circle back and have that overall strategic conversation.
But like, the thing about force push and force choke, and to some extent Jedi mind trick, although it affects the table a little bit less significantly, like it does a very different thing, is that like force push and force choke on their own are super good at interacting with objective play. When you put them together, they get kind of stupid. Like, if you're playing breakthrough and you like, there's a unit that's going to break through, you can like force push them, cohere them all back, then choke the leader so that you like basically effectively force push them twice. There's like some weird stuff you can do with that. Kyle, you were mentioning, you force push them and then like pick up the box with Maul. Like Vader can do that too. Like there are other units in the game that have this combination of cards that allow you to do that. Just this is the first jumping. I mean, and to be fair, theoretically, Anakin can do all of the things that don't include Juyo with these 2 upgrades that any other Force user could, right? He's also got jump. So if you can get around that flaw card, good luck. He can be the character we're talking about. I don't think this is exclusively a Maul conversation. It's just I think Maul is the best at it.
Well, that's what it is. The infiltrate card enables Maul to be a step above everyone else that can take those cards, essentially.
Do you guys see any other, besides choke, push, and saber throw, are there any other force upgrades that are even close to this conversation?
I don't think it's particularly close, but I have seen people talking about force reflexes. Of all the force users to put it on, I think Maul is probably, other than Kenobi, Maul might be the best.
Yeah, because he doesn't have ways to get dodges for free.
He doesn't have ways to get dodges for free. He also kind of like, if your opponent doesn't have a force user, he kind of wants to activate early. I still don't think it's very good, but I do think it's maybe in the conversation. I think I would take saber throw before I took force reflexes.
Yeah, I'm so heavy in the push choke camp, so I don't even think you could sway me. But again, that's just me personally.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of at the point where I wish that the card force push was taken out of the game and it was just a part of being a Jedi. Like increase every Jedi in the games by 10 points and just let them have the force push ability and open up those force slots. I would like to see that, I think. I know that, that's probably a little controversial and a little off topic, but I don't think you can, at least from a competitive side of the coin thing, force push is not optional.
The only I could see Palpatine not taking it.
That's fair.
Yeah, the only one I could see not taking it would be Palpatine, and that's simply because if he's at range 1, he's blasting you anyways. So he doesn't really have a need to force push you. That said, I built a Palpatine list the other day for the article, and it felt weird not putting push on him. I actually might have put push on him. I'm not gonna lie, just because even though if he is at range 1 and he's most likely jazz handing you. We keep talking about it, and we talked about it a lot with Anakin. We're talking about it with Maul. The tools that you're getting with force push, it isn't always about setting up an attack. It isn't always about bringing someone around in a corner to trigger a standby or do something wacky. It's like there's so many different things you can do with objectives and how you cohere things. There's just so many different things. So even though I say Palpatine doesn't need force push, it feels bad not putting it on him at the same time.
Right. I mean, it's mostly about undoing what your opponent is trying to get done with their objectives. And like going last and just screwing with them and saying, okay, well, I'm going to choke this leader off the point. Then I'm going to push this leader off the point. And then I'm going to attack this unit and like try to neutralize 3 objective scorers or however many, at the same time. I'm thinking specifically key positions. Yeah. They're all going to be clustered up in one spot. I mean, perfectly.
So some of the stuff you can do is insane with Force users. Like Vader can do that twice in one turn, right? He's like, oh,
real good.
He's like, oh, sorry, you were up by 5 on the point. Well, now we're tied, right? At the end of it, blackable. It is like, and you're like, oh, right? Like,
I'm like, just make sure he dies before that happens.
I'm like fairly certain that if you're going against like a Dooku Maul list on key positions, and Dooku and Maul are somehow alive turn 6, you've lost. Yeah, you will not win that game. Like Dooku is going to come up and he's going to do some stuff. Maul's going to come up and he's going to do some stuff. And all of a sudden, all the unit leaders that you had on that middle KP, they're dead. Like, and there's nothing you can do about that. And again, that's like a Christmas land ending for that kind of a list.
Not even though.
But that's the thing. Like, it's not out of the realm of possibility. Dooku plays defensive. Maul can get into a position. You can kind of wait your opponent. That's the thing about droids, right? And that's why Force users, specifically with droids, are so good. Is that like B1s allow you to kind of delay the game in the way that Force users want you to delay the game. And then by the time your Force user gets in, your opponent has no real way to answer it because the mass of the droids have delayed it to the point where those Force users have that opening to get to, basically. Like, they basically part the sea for those Force users to do what they need to do, essentially. So, like, a KP against a Dooku Maul list does not sound really fun to me.
Well, I mean, and this is, I think, one of the advantages of... and I think there are a myriad of reasons to bid for blue with Maul. I agree. Infiltrate shenanigans being one of the primary reasons, but like, if you take recover the supplies, like key positions, hostage and like VAPs, like
that's the deck you want for Maul.
Yeah, it's just like there's no way to play those objectives without like dealing with Maul, and it's gonna be a slog. They're gonna get the objectives they want, and they're gonna be able to put Maul. If you're playing competitively and you're playing against somebody that like has figured Maul out, like they should be able to get Maul into the correct position like a good percentage of the time at the beginning of the game, right? And it's going to be very hard to deal with.
Ironically, I think that we discussed like bidding. We always discuss bidding, right? I think when Vital Assets dropped, we thought we would see like a bunch of bidding. I feel like bidding has kind of like stabilized. So like if you're bringing like a list, you're like at like a 1, 2, or 3. If you're not taking 1, 2, or 3, then you're at like 10 plus, and you're not in that 3 to like 9 range, right? It's usually like an extreme bid or like a very small bid to try and get blue against like a high bid list. Ironically, I think that shifts with Maul because people are going to try and bid with Maul to get blue. And I think that like Mandos want to be blue as well, right? Like a list with Mandalorians are going to want to try and skew their deck to what they're good at, right? Clones and Imperials, I feel like clones have more leeway when it comes to bidding. And then I feel like Imperials don't really have any leeway with bidding. I mean, I'm just being straight up. So like, I feel like Empire might not bid as much and they're going to get undercut by Rebels and Rebels and in the droids quite often. I think the clones are a bit different. I feel like Mike, I feel like you've been actually leaning towards taking a bit of a bid with, clones, and maybe that, and then you kind of shifted to not taking clones because a bid because you had to bring a captain rather than a phase 2, mind you, in Yavin base. But I feel like bidding is going to change substantially with an infiltrating Sith that can be in your face real quick if he's blue. Where that bid line falls, I don't know. But I think it's super important going forward.
It's interesting. I actually think it's kind of a weird dichotomy, and we're getting a little bit down a bidding rabbit hole here, but I think that Maul is like another instance of a list that wants to bid and is uniquely good when it does. And I think that actually pushes the meta farther away from bidding. I know that sounds a little weird, but like, for instance, with kind of clones being at the top of the heap, I actually think it's pretty right to not bid at all as clones right now. Like they can deal with anything pretty much because of how standby sharing works. Like they definitely are not going to try and outbid a 15-point Mando bid or a 15-point Maul bid. Like they're not even going to touch that. And there's no reason to, because they don't need to. And I think that at this point, if you're gonna bid, you have to have a really good reason to be bidding. And if you're not, you should just actively consider yourself red player. And I think Maul is kind of like another one of, like, Maul specifically is a unit in the game that lends itself towards like, this list wants to take like a 20-point bid. So like other lists really, like, they know they're not going to be able to bid against that. And maybe it's not 20, maybe it's like 15 or 12 or whatever.
Even 15 is pretty actually kind of difficult in a decent. I mean, 10 is more realistic.
That may be true, but like 10, a bid of 10 is still a lot.
It
right?
is.
Like it's a large bid, and like
it's aggressive tactics.
It is.
You have to put it into perspective, right?
In order to get a bid of 10 in most armies, you have to like shave an activation or an important upgrade or something in order to get there. And I don't think most lists can afford to do that. At least not in a way where they effectively interact with the lists that are good at bidding at the 10-point juncture, right? The Mandos are doing something specific. Maul is doing something very specific. You've got to have a really good reason to shave 10 points. Thoughts?
No, I agree. I actually think it's okay to not bid too, especially if you're running Maul with Staps, which is kind of hard at the moment. But we do know that we know basically nothing about the T series except that he costs 55 points. But that's enough to still know that regardless of what he does, at that cost, you can run him with Maul and some B1 heavies and Saps, theoretically. And if you're running a list like that, I've been running RIP Team League, but I've been running basically a red player list with Staps for Team League. And it's kind of the first time, at least in any tournament for me, that I've kind of been intentionally not bidding. And I did it as like an experiment. It worked out really well. From my own personal experience. But if you run Maul with Staps, I think you can comfortably just do red player and be like, I don't care what your objective is. If it's one of those 4 you listed, great. Maul's good at those. If it's something like breakthrough or bombing run, the Staps are good at those, and Maul's also good at bombing run. So you're basically covered. I think you can comfortably run, once the T series comes out, some kind of Stap Maul tier series B1 list and be pretty comfortable in the 797 to 799 range. But
keep in mind on bombing run that if you infiltrate with Maul, you cannot put a bomb on him. Just
no, yeah.
No. I'm just saying for the listeners,
he's really good at stealing bombs.
Well, yeah, that too.
Yeah.
So like make sure that if you go into the game with the intention that you want to give him a bomb, he cannot infiltrate. But if you want him to go steal a bomb, go ahead and infiltrate.
Yeah, give him your opponent's bombs.
Seems good.
Yeah. Anyway, we kind of hijacked this upgrade discussion. Are there any training upgrades that you guys would consider besides offensive push, defensive stance, or tenacity?
Seize the initiative, I think, is a possibility. I know that droids have like this crazy order control, but if you find that Maul has, and again, I know we discussed about him not really wanting to go off on his own, but if he does go off on his own and those droids are with him, right? And those droids are now not in a spot where they can be given a coordinated order, your bag's not going to be just Maul. It's probably a 50-50 if it's just the droids with Maul, depending on how you coordinate chain. I get that. But a 50-50 is not as good as the sure thing. And Seize gives you that opportunity to make sure it is a sure thing if you need it. I think it depends on who you're pairing him with. I think it depends on how you play him. I think it depends on how you set up a list. Like there's a lot of ways you can get around not needing Seize. Like it's not like an auto include on him. Personally, I would take it because I feel like if I played Maul, I would kind of play him independently, not in the sense that like aggressively independently, but he'll probably be in a spot where he's not going to be coordinated to. And I like that sure thing on like a Dooku 1 pip, right? Or like a Dooku 2 pip, or a cunning card that also gives Maul an order seems really good. So you have to make sure you have ways to get that. So Seize is something I would consider at least.
I'm taking blue player bid in that slot. I think my default loadout for Maul, at least to start out, is going to be Force Push, Force Choke, Tenacity, blank.
Yeah, I agree.
And it like offensive push is good, but I don't really feel like he needs it. And that may turn out to not be true, but I
think you can go an entire game without Maul attacking and have him still be really useful.
I think you can too, and I also think it's worth noting that like I don't know, he's basically just Operative Vader with an extra 4 white dice on his attack. Like I don't know, it seems like all upside to me on that front, in that like you're like I've got 5 red dice to start with and another 4 dice to like kind of play the RNG slots on, and he gets a name token from both of his 1 pips, or maybe it's just one. I don't know.
Just that last.
Yeah.
But he's also got the observation tokens to kind of that kit going on. I don't know.
How do you not take the best upgrade in the game in this other slot? It's just Overwatch. You can just troll people with move, standby all game. There's just no reason not to try.
I mean, I think it's more of a conversation
by the way.
than like you'd think.
Yeah, actually, it might not be bad.
Yeah, I think Overwatch is like actually very good. I mean, not very good. It's like it is a good card even outside the clone stuff.
Well, the key component on throwing Overwatch on any jumping Force user is the fact that you can jump again with that standby. I'm not saying it's great. But I'm saying like if you jump over a building and take a standby, that standby, you can also jump off of that, which is a corner case of jumping twice.
I actually think that the biggest case for standby tokens on Force users generally is to embed them safely in melee without like cutting up whatever they're in melee. Like, you can move standby into melee with anything, and if it tries to withdraw, you just chop it up, and if something else moves around you, like you can just wait until the right time to chop the unit up, or your opponent just passes their turn. But like
honestly, if you want to embed Maul, right? Sorry to cut you off, but if you want to embed Maul, you could actually just move standby and melee.
Yeah,
and then whenever that thing activates, you just pop right back in there and just like, nope, I am stuck to you like glue.
Right.
They can't do anything about it.
Darth Maul likes warm hugs.
Yeah, Maul likes warm hugs. They just can't do anything because you're engaged, and their options are withdraw or punch you, which accomplishes your goal either way.
Totally, right? Like, you're triggering the standby in either situation. You either kill them or they die. And yeah, I mean, and I think generally speaking, like, people don't do that enough on Force users. A lot of the time, it's not that big a deal. Like, the difference between just sabering dudes down when you hit them and like taking a standby token can be like actively bad if for a variety of reasons, but you know, there are situations where it's good.
Well, it gives you a third move.
Well, a lot of the times what it is that when do you have the opportunity with another Force user to move and standby? Like when are you usually like 6 inches away from your opponent to take that move standby? Maul has the opportunity to do it at 12. That's the difference, right? Or actually, he really has the opportunity to do it almost at 16, right? He can move, force push you in and take the standby. Other Force users don't have that option. And if they're 6 inches away from being at a distance of something else is gone. Something else is happening. Like, there's more happening in the game than a move standby. Well, I've done it. I'm not saying that a move standby is bad. I think it's awesome because if you do it into a unit that hasn't activated, you're making sure that they're either punching you or if they withdraw, you have a way to get back in with them, right? As long as there's no other Force user around. But it's harder to do that when you have 2 actions as opposed to 3, is what I'm boiling it down to.
It is. I will say that I actually do it more on Vader. A lot of the times you do it because you need to force choke something and you need to saber something, but you have to do it with different timings
at different times. Yeah,
and that's, you know, it doesn't come up a lot because like Vader's not very good, right? And he's like basically the only person that can like really do that right now. I mean, like Dooku can too, but the fact that he can't like relentless and stuff. He's like, Dooku is like way less apt to be in the middle of a fight than Vader is. And so a lot of times, like, you may need to force choke like a box carrier before it runs away, and you also might need to like, you know, handle another unit. So you'll force choke something, move into melee, take a standby because you need to do whatever. It's just like there are a variety of reasons to kind of end up doing that, but I do think that force choke is the kind of the game changer in that equation, because unlike the light side Force users that can only attack once a turn or like kill something once a turn, it's a little less interesting.
So before we run out of time here, I want to make sure we actually talk about the probe droids because we haven't done that yet.
We've spent 2 hours talking about Maul, but no probe droids.
Yes.
Oh, look, now CIS gets a 35-point activation.
Yeah, importantly, a unique one gated behind a Force user, but nonetheless, a 35-point activation.
It's not quite as good as R2 because R2 is an operative, but yeah.
Also, they do not have secret mission, which would clearly be overpowered.
They do have incognito, though.
Yeah,
they do.
I mean, I actually don't think there's that big a difference between this unit and R2, but
the lack of secret missions. They do a lot of other things better than R2 does, for sure. But
they definitely fight better than R2.
It's apples to oranges.
Yeah.
They're considerably more fragile than R2 is.
That is fair, but like I think their incognito is a lot better than inconspicuous when it comes to not getting shot.
Sure, totally. But they're also only 3 health. R2 is 4 to 6 with 2 self repairs. So
yeah, I mean,
I don't know. These guys when they actually get shot, these guys evaporate basically. Now incognito helps a lot here. They also have 1 health per model. There's 3 models. They have a white save. They do have Observe 3, which is choose an enemy unit at range 1 to 3 and in line of sight against 3 observation tokens, which was explained in Maul's preview article basically as you can reroll 1 dice per observation token when attacking that unit. So it's kind of like a little mini aim token on a target. Goes a long way to helping those white dice in Maul's pool be a little better. Of course, you can also just shoot that unit with a B1 or something. But yeah, for 35 points, that's super useful. They have detachment Maul, so you can only take them with Maul. They deploy near him. Hover Air 1, which is, as far as I can tell, like jump, except you can do it twice, basically. More or less.
Seems that's what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, while moving, ignore terrain height 1 or lower is the reminder text here. They have a comm slot, which is super interesting. I think I'm putting comms relay here just so that you can use them as like a tether to get orders to Maul. You know, you can bounce orders from your B1 chain to them and then bounce them to Maul. You can also, like, if Maul is not within range 3 of your commander, you can order the probe droids and then bounce it a further range 2 up to Maul.
I sort of love these guys as a one-shot comms jammer, to be honest. You know,
that's the other upgrade I could see in there. Like, that would be a real pain in the butt in certain circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, like, you dive in there with Maul, you bring his probe droids with him, and all of a sudden you've got, like, this bubble of stuff that is engaged with Maul that can't get orders, and unless, of course, they're issuing to themselves, because comm jammer doesn't prevent that. But, like, yeah, I don't know. That seems real good. I mean, it's a little fragile. It's clearly one use. Like, you're gonna basically break your incognito to do it.
Yep.
But I mean, as far as like crazy plays go, I think that's probably the highest utility you can probably get out of these guys outside of interacting with objectives, because clearly that's what they're very good at.
Mm-hmm. Engaging something with them as a last-ditch effort to tie an objective or prevent a score, also really important for them.
Yeah, that's why I feel like these are like mini R2s, because they basically are an objective point if you're able to keep them alive until turn 6.
Accurate. Yeah, they're like a turn 6 objective play. Like after they've done what they could for Maul, right?
Yeah, it's notable that you can't like voluntarily drop incognito. I mean, you can do it when you interact with something like a box or evaporator. But if you want to, like, if the end of the game comes around and they still have it and you want to score them on breakthrough, unless your opponent breaks incognito for you, they still don't count. You can't be like, I'm dropping incognito to score this breakthrough.
Well, right, but you and clarify.
I mean, you can attack with them.
Well, you can also just move to like range 1, can't you? No.
They don't lose it until they defend against an attack, or make an attack, or interact with an objective.
And they can be attacked if they're at range 1, I guess.
Correct.
That's the caveat.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the conventional way. Like if your opponent wants to drop incognito, that's the way they do it, right? They move to range 1 and then they attack them. But yeah, just being at range 1 of something does not drop incognito unless that something attacks you, or vice versa. So clearly you could just attack something with them, right? Their attack is pretty good. It's 2 white per model with suppressive, range 1 to 2. And so surge. six white. Yeah, 6 white with surge. Suppressive, range 1 to 2.
It's like a fleet trooper. It's not terrible.
I mean, sort of. It's lacking Pierce, but yeah.
No, it's like it's a base fleet trooper, right?
Yeah.
It's 35
it's
points.
Not terrible.
You could do worse. You really could.
Certainly you could. And but yeah, clearly it's not like for the bulk of the game, you don't want to be doing that with these guys because they're as soon as they lose incognito, they're going to get plastered.
Yeah. Just waiting for them to take down a unit of rebel troopers.
Yeah.
You're dead.
There's going to be some hilarious stories of Sith probe droids taking down some random unit in an important part of the game with their little electro-stun micro blasters. Yeah.
What a troll unit. I love it.
And there are going to be a lot of games where these are really frustrating. I think, in a similar way that R2 is. You know, you're like, oh, I could never legitimately shoot them, and they killed Luke on turn 6 because I couldn't get at them, and then they dropped to range 1 and nuked him. You know,
or they caused the unit to panic or something in an important moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see.
I feel like I've shaken my head more times in this cast than any other cast.
Get ready.
So they do take up a special forces slot.
I don't think
It's
that's a
fine.
huge deal.
It's fine.
It's a lot less relevant for separatists than it is for the factions.
Just bring 2 BX droids. Who cares?
Or a 0 BX droids. You know?
Yeah.
0.
But like the CIS list that were running BX droids were only running 2 to begin with.
Yeah.
You know,
I think that's less of a big deal. It's important to note.
I mean, let's put it this way. Let's say you were running 2 BX droids and that's your list. I mean, do you cut like a naked B1 for these probe droids? I mean, probably. Yes. I mean, I don't see the downside to doing that, right? Sure, you lose body mass, but like you can't shoot them anyways, so you kind of gain, right?
Well, it's worth noting that if you're playing BX droids with these guys, it kind of screws with your order pool because you've got more things in the chain that want to be the link in the chain, right? Because none of the special forces have coordinate. Right.
Well, and that's why I like the relay. To make sure that you get that face up to Maul, and then you just have special forces tokens in your pool.
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing them with BXs, for sure.
Yeah.
But like if you're playing them with Staps, like that's a little bit less relevant, probably.
Yeah. Well, and Staps do have coordinates, so.
Well, that's what I mean, right? You can kind of keep that chain going.
The Oprah mean. You get an order. You get an order. Yep. Range 2 away from you get an order still. And
yep. I actually think there's a reason to take an an out of mana droid in a Maul list if you do the comms relay thing on the probes, because you can bounce the end of your chain range to the probes. Anyway, we've talked a lot about Maul and probes and lots of things today: bidding, terrain, scouting.
Tired dad cast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm losing my voice a little bit.
Good.
All right. Daylight savings time does not exist for kids. Okay.
Yeah.
Just to throw that out there, it does not exist for children.
Yeah.
Their internal clock is the same no matter what you do with that clock.
Yeah. It is, and I made the grossly incompetent dad mistake of not changing my daughter's clock. So she has a clock in her room, and the deal is like it's one of those like color changing clocks. You can set an alarm on it. It doesn't like buzz or anything, but it changes color at a specific time. So the deal is she can't get out of her room in the morning until it turns a certain color, unless she has to pee or something. But otherwise she'd like walk into her bedroom at 5:30 in the morning. But I did not change that clock. So she came in, an hour early. I had no recourse to be like, sweetie, it's daylight savings. It's not time to get up yet, but my clock is green. And I'm like, all right. But I forgot to change what time it is on your clock. You don't understand.
This is really my fault.
Yeah. Yeah. It evens out, but it takes like a week.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yesterday morning. Fall back is usually like, yes, I get to sleep an extra hour. Yeah, no, definitely not.
I prefer springing ahead than I do falling back.
Yeah.
Really? Oh no, God no.
Because then the kids sleep an extra hour.
The kids sleep an extra hour. It's the complete inverse on the children.
Yep.
It's wacky, but it's how it works. I'm telling you.
That's how it goes. All right. Any final thoughts? Mike, your hair is really long.
I know, it's getting there, right? It's like, know, it's
you need like a top knot or something.
I have a hair tie and stuff, so ready to go. It's just I'm at home alone at the moment, so there's not really any point to, putting it up into something. So, but yeah, no, I'm not going to. I think it's gonna be long for a while here.
You got to start practicing your hair flip,
right? No,
That's how he's gonna beat Maul. He gets mad.
I actively try not to do that because my hair was also really long in high school, and like I got into like some really bad habits with the hair flip thing, and it's just like because it's really easy to do because you're just trying to like get it out of your face, you know. And
wait, hang on. What's like a bad habit with a hair flip? I'm trying to figure out how that could.
It's just like it's not. I don't know. I feel like flipping your hair is a bad habit if you do it a ton. Personally. Okay. I don't know. Maybe it's not, but I am self-conscious about it. Let me put it that way. It's just so it used to be like we were on the like cross country and track team, right? And you know we had really long hair, and when we were running, it always ended up in your face. And we didn't have hair ties or anything because you know we were boys in high school and we didn't believe in that sort of thing. So. Yeah, I would just be like constantly like flipping it out of my face when I'm running because you're jogging and your hair is all over the place, and yeah, it was terrible.
Oh, yeah.
So, well, someday you're going to be like 70 and you're going to be like, man, I wish I had hair that I could flip right now.
Oh, totally. So I'm lucky. My family seems to have hair very long into their lifespan, so I think I'm okay there. But yes, that is probably true.
All right. Well, on that note. We are the Notorious Scoundrels. I'm Kyle.
I'm Mike.
I'm David.
I'm short-haired Barry.
One day I will rejoin you.
And we'll see you next week.